Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants.
Welcome back to the Fort Worth 148 podcast. My name is Evve Kirkendall. I am the chaplain of Fort Worth 148.
This is Brandy Patton, the Worshipful Master of 148.
And this is Cody Cox, the Senior Warden of Fort Worth 148.
It's great to have all of you guys back. Again, this is a podcast that is committed to quality and constant improvement. So I want you all to know that we have heard the cry from the people, and we have made strategic and important improvements in our sound equipment. I hope that this is something that you're noticing and it's coming across today. This is the first episode. We've got this brand new recording setup. We've got multiple channels. We all have our own mics now instead of using one mic. So we hope that the recording quality for all of our listeners is improved. And this is all thanks to our Worshipful Master, Brandy Patton here, who's brought it into us.
With his headphones on, looking like a snazzy DJ.
Please approve my budget.
Please approve my budget, 148.
Please do that.
Oh, yeah. I think that this is a great setup. And based on the tests that we did, this is going to be great recording equipment. So I think you all will definitely appreciate this.
Make it easier to edit too, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the things that go on behind the scenes in putting a podcast together is where the real work is. The fun part's getting around a table and talking, but the hard part is actually putting stuff together.
We could do a podcast about doing podcasts.
I'm sure somebody's got that. You talk about the living in the metaverse.
Exactly. How do I podcast? Here, I'll listen to this podcast.
I'll listen to a podcast about podcasting.
The best ones are accidental.
Yes, absolutely. Today on the show, we decided we're going to start a new segment this afternoon. And we are going to be doing some tinfoil hat talk. Gentlemen, get your tinfoil hats on and let's talk Masonic conspiracies.
I think it's something that people take way too seriously sometimes. So we're gonna kind of have fun with it today. So I'll get started off with Masonic thing that the city of Washington, D.C. is basically a big Masonic city, and it was built specifically for Masonic purposes. And I've seen this on all kinds of television shows, on the History Channel and all that kind of stuff. So if you're not quite sure about this or unaware, there are these theories out there that Washington, D.C. was designed specifically for Masonic purposes, and things were placed in a particular position and orientation because the Masons were trying to show that the United States was a Masonic country. We do know that Washington, of course, who was a prominent Freemason, had some kind of say in the layout of Washington, D.C., but it wasn't his call. The guy that did the layout, okay, this is a French name, so excuse me if I get it wrong, Pierre Charles L'Enfant. He was... Some people are wondering, was he a Freemason or was he not? It looks to be like he was going to be initiated into the fraternity, or he was proposed for it but never joined. But because of that, a lot of people say that when the city was designed, that it was for Freemasonry purposes. They point to a number of streets that make a pentagram. And if you go from, I believe it's the White House, if you're on the National Lawn, you go to the White House, to some prominent places around town, it makes the square, and compasses and things like that. And then, of course, people talk about George Washington's, his memorial being in the shape of an obelisk and how that is a Masonic thing. And in my looking and thinking, and again, watching the shows and all that kind of stuff, especially with the layout of the city, at this point, anytime you go into any city, I'm fairly certain that you're probably going to be able to find streets that are in the shape of some sort of pentagram or some sort of square or compass, just because of the nature of the beast when it comes to the laying out of a city and squares and things like that. From what I've seen in this kind of stuff, there really is no definitive proof that this was designed in this particular way. We talked a little bit about George Washington's monument, the fact that an obelisk was honestly, at that point, it was like in vogue. It was like the cool thing to do. This kind of fascination with Egyptians things and stuff like that. Heck, even if you go back to when Washington was actually still walking around, if I remember correctly, they had just discovered that there actually were things such as dinosaurs. So dinosaurs got really popular when Washington was kicking and screaming. So the idea that having an obelisk up is something Masonic, no, it was just the cool thing to do. So that's what they did with that. Have you guys heard anything different from what I'm talking about? Or
In terms of the city layout, I've seen a lot of people debunk that, kind of in the same way that they've debunked things like the Bible code. You know how you can take the Bible and you select a certain number and you go a certain number of letters, and in strangely enough in English, not in the original language, but that's a whole nother conversation. But there are like these secret codes that you can debunk or that you can find, where there's like secret messages. If you choose every fifth letter of the 9th chapter of Isaiah, you get like this secret message that only people in the know. And I think it's the same kind of thing, that if you choose any number in a large enough book, you're going to get letters that line up into words and phrases. And the same is true, like you're pointing out, in any city, because of the way that cities are constructed, and they become these kind of Frankenstein monsters that are just built one piece, growing and attached to another. You're going to get these weird layouts where just about any large city in America, you can pick a shape and you're going to be able to find that shape somewhere in the layout of the city.
Whether it's called a confirmation bias.
Right. It's one of those things where pick a shape, pick a number like of important objects, and you can connect those objects in any number of ways.
yeah, if you look hard enough, you're going to find it.
Right. And
I know that like with the pentagram in Washington, D.C., like it looks like it's there, but one of the streets would have to continue through like a housing complex or something like that
Right.
to complete itself.
Yeah, it's this very weird kind of, you can tell that there's an agenda, that they are looking first for their opinion, and then they're supporting it with, look at this, you can see a pentagram in the city of, it just doesn't make sense. And then that also presupposes that the pentagram is like a really important image to us.
Right.
And while there are definitely 5-pointed stars all over Masonry, and in fact in every realm of symbolism out there, you pick any group of symbols in the world pretty much, and they're going to have some sort of star, 5-pointed or otherwise.
We've got 50 of them on the United States flag.
It presupposes that there's something special. So does that make, does the 50 stars on the flag, why couldn't George Washington have just been using the symbols that were already on the flags of his day, the stars that were already there? So the presupposition that it's a Masonic problem.
Speaking of the flag, we know what 33 is. What's 17 mean?
It's these weird, like,
Never
things.
mind how many states there were originally and now.
Yeah, there were 13 colonies.
Pierre L'Enfant designed it solely to have poor traffic in the future. That's
And
my guys.
there's also this idea.
He must have designed Dallas as well.
Right.
If that's the case.
We love you in Dallas. We really do, despite your traffic problems. But no, there's a lot of history also surrounding how countries' capitals are designed to be intimidating to foreign dignitaries who might come to the city. So if you've ever been to Washington, D.C., you know that driving up Pennsylvania Avenue and into the White House area, it is very designed. Think about in the 1800s, if you were going up into that area, it would very much convey the power and regal nature of Washington, D.C.
It would be the same thing as if you're driving up to the Palace of Versailles. You're like, oh my
Right.
gosh, it's a city in a wall.
Yeah,
It's
but
designed to be
in
intimidating.
D.C., those roads weren't there when it was the capital. So the imposing drive and all the embassies and all the security didn't exist. It was dirt roads. And
But there are design elements that were made, but the idea that Masons had something to do with it, I think is ridiculous.
it'd be a lot prettier if they were.
Yeah, I think we would have chosen much more overt.
Which-
and
D.C. has some beautiful places.
it absolutely does.
Over the last
It's a
200
beautiful
years.
city. But I think that if Masons were going to design it with masonry in mind, we would have been a little bit more heavy-handed with our
DC
application.
probably would still not be completed because the committee had not finished their report yet.
Because they're too busy making green bean sandwiches.
And figuring out how much sugar should be in those green beans.
Oh my gosh.
What's the next one we got?
So next one, Brandy is going to talk to us about Taxel. Tell us more.
The Taxel hoax. It's amazing what happened 130 years ago. We still believe today. Leo Taxel was an author, French. His full name, let me find it here. I'm going to mess this up.
Boy, we took the day to find French people to talk about.
Marie Joseph Gabriel Antoine Jogan Paget? I butchered it. I'm sorry. He died in 1907. Anyways, the National Enquirer didn't exist back then, but he would be the closest thing to it. He pretended to be a Catholic. He announced that he joined, and he actually had an audience with the Pope at one point. But through being a Catholic, he bashed Freemasonry because that's the best way to sell books is bash something that people don't understand. Where am I going with this? He had an audience with the Pope anyways. So all the Satanism, the sacrifices, the riding the goat, that's all Leo Taxel stuff, and it never even happened. He actually had a press conference where he announced, it's all a hoax. I wanted to sell books. And it didn't work, so he still sold books. Hey, I'm going to go with it. But the man himself was excommunicated from the Catholic Church afterwards, which that should say something. But so and he was a Mason. I saw somewhere that he was an heir apprentice. He went through 1 degree at least. But anyways, he's the person that joins organizations to bash them in order to profit himself. He died in 1907, and we're still believing what he said. Baphomet, the most famous portrait we know about anti-Freemasonry. Yeah, he found it. It'll look cool. That's what we're going to use. There's no basis for it. So just a total fraud.
It reminds me a lot, the Leo Taxel hoax and the kind of supporting things reminds me of like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a document that has been proven to be a hoax number of times over. Like scientists have studied the documents, sociologists, historians, all of these people have studied this, and yet there are still these theories perpetuated about Jews and Freemasons and all of these things from the 1919 through the Nazi era. And that's how we get this very anti-Semitic world that often perpetuates online. But it's very similar. Like the hoax is outed as a hoax, and then suddenly it's the truths, and I'm using the word truth in air quotes here, the truths that are being unearthed, despite the person saying that it's a hoax, still perpetuate even today.
I try to compare him to Alex Jones, more modern day, but Alex Jones actually believes what he says. But Leo Taxel clearly didn't.
Yeah, he admitted that he lied just to sell books.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Which is crazy. And we're still dealing with that as a Masonic organization today.
Yes, we don't worship the devil. We don't have goats. What are the other hoaxes that came from?
Well, I don't know about your lodge.
Yeah, well, like,
Grand Lodge of Texas, we don't worship the devil. I can say that for a fact.
Yeah. And there's always that question because one of the only requirements that we have is that you can't be an atheist, so therefore you have to believe in deity. One of the things that, often gets tossed around in some of these debates is, could someone who is in fact a Satanist or a Luciferian become a Freemason? And I know that we have talked about that in our private circles a few times. We've never had that situation come upon us, but if they believe in deity, then they should be able to join, and that's an interesting little thing there.
Unless it's a mocking religion.
Right.
I'm doing quotes, you can't see them, but Pastafarians, love
Yeah,
you guys, but you're making fun of Christians.
Yeah, the folks who are Satanists, but they really just want to...
we talked about like the flying spaghetti monster.
Right.
That's
Or
the
they-
Pastafarians.
They're really just trying to... a
Yeesh.
lot of the Church of Satan's role is simply to combat the posting of the Ten Commandments in public spaces.
Yeah.
And so they are really just atheists trolling Christians for the most part.
And while we're talking about that, I kind of want to make this statement, and I'm sure this is going to be at the beginning of the podcast, but again, just in case everybody knows, anything that is said on this podcast is not the opinion of Fort Worth 148, nor is it the opinion of the Grand Lodge of Texas. It's just
Or any
us
specific
three
lodge.
schlubs sitting around this table throwing out our opinions. But what I was going to say is that when it comes to conversations that I've heard about people that are concerned about Satanists coming to the Masonic Lodge to become members, or people that are of a different religion that, that they just don't understand or they're afraid of or something like that, I would caution most lodges out there to understand that there is not this huge wave of Satanists that are out there that want to become Masons, because for the most part, their beliefs and things like that don't necessarily gel with what we believe and hold dear. Now, sometimes you're going to have that, but I doubt very seriously that's going to happen in very small rural lodges. We're talking about lodges that are located in Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Austin, San Antonio. Again, we're talking about a lot of this stuff in tongue in cheek, but at the same time, the reality is that could very well happen, but the reality of it happening in a very small rural lodge is 0 to none. There is not, again, this massive wave of people that are wanting to infiltrate into the Masonic lodges, of being they're in a different religion or something like that. I think that is also something that we come across a lot, where people are overreacting with that and not realizing that's not really the case.
Well,
Yeah.
even more funny about Taxel, it's not really funny, it's sad, but he created what's called Palladism. It's a sect within Freemasonry that worships Lucifer, but it's also the Illuminati, so it's the same people. You think that in history they'd be separate, but everybody believes what he said about Palladism to be the Illuminati, and we're the same thing.
Yeah, and see, when you said Palladism, I instantly thought about people that like to sleep on the floor.
Apparently that was part of the ritual.
Oh, okay, then never mind.
Well, it all
Hey,
full circle.
Listen,
full circle moment.
when your back is going out, maybe you are a Pallatist. No.
He really didn't like Albert Pike, apparently, either, from my research.
There's a lot of people out there that don't like Albert Pike, but I don't have.
I'm not one of those people.
I don't happen to be one of those people. I don't have a dog in that hunt. But
Isn't that where most like spin-offs from Christianity and things came from? Is I don't like you, I'm going to make my own.
yeah, and there's Morals and Dogma. Wrote a paper that used Morals and Dogma. I don't pretend to be an expert on Morals and Dogma by any stretch. If you've read that book, it's
3 foot wide.
Yeah, it's a difficult trudge to get through, but I can understand why some people might misinterpret some of what Albert Pike was saying. If I were a person who was not a member of the craft and I were reading some of what he was saying, I could definitely twist it to some probably nefarious ends that end up in places like Leo Taxel's talking about.
Can he directly relate the light to Lucifer being the light bringer?
Yeah, I think that there's something alluding to that. I don't remember the exact phrase, but I know it's in the first section of the book. But that brings us to my favorite little conspiracy, and I'm not sure that it's so much a conspiracy, but it's more or less a response that people always seem to have when we are very honest with them that we're not the conspiratorial organization that they think we are. And it's that phrase that we've all heard at some point. So say it with me, gentlemen. You're not high enough. That just blows my mind. And I've had to explain that to people so many times, that a Master Mason, the 3rd degree in Masonry, is the highest degree in Masonry. And that other organizations, like the Scottish Rite or like the York, they might have numbered degrees, but that doesn't necessarily make them higher. Whenever we're talking and counseling new prospective members to 148, I always use the analogy that there is a stairway that goes up 3 steps. And once you get to that top step, the 3rd degree, the Master Mason, there are hallways that go down to your left, to your right, ahead of you, whatever that might be. And those represent the various organizations that have other degrees that you can explore. That stairway does not ascend in those hallways. It simply is more information, more light, as it were, that you can partake in. And in trying to explain that to somebody who believes in, I had a former friend of mine say that, oh, you're not high enough. You haven't been told about how Masons are responsible for contrails and chemtrails and all that stuff. And bless their heart.
The whole
It
argument,
really-
you could insert any group. Catholics are responsible, Jews are responsible, Christians are responsible. Yeah, the people making those decisions are probably some of these names.
Right, and that's an important stuff. But then you start tying in all of these conspiracies come together like one big yarn knot, that all things kind of get woven together, and it's just one big nebulous they, the infamous capital T they, that is responsible for all of the bad or nefarious things that are happening, whether it be chemtrails or turning the frogs gay or whatever happens to be the
Respect Alex Jones.
Yeah, respect that. Whatever happens to be your conspiracy du jour, they all get wrapped up, and somehow we as Freemasons end up kind of the center of it. I think it has to do with the fact that we're an organization that has secrets that we don't tell people about. And we tell people we don't tell you about these things. And they assume that means that we're some sort of secret society. But we're just guarding the secret of the green bean casserole. I don't think that they would even believe us if they knew what like a regular stated meeting looked.
They would come to a regular stated meeting and be like, you guys are responsible for nothing.
Yeah. You can't even be responsible for yourself.
That's right.
Yeah. So
As a Freemason, it also amazes me how many decisions we make at a bar with 3 guys,
yeah.
not in a town meetings. No, we're going to do this. We just decided this right now. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, and that's often what happens is we sit around, we have a pint or maybe a cup of coffee, depending on where we're at,
Topo Chico.
and we hang out and we come up with an idea one of us is passionate about, and then we sell it to the lodge, and either they say yes, which is most of the time what happens, or they look at us like we have 3 heads, and they're like, yeah, no, that's not.
I think the only thing that Freemasons right now are really responsible for is the Boston Tea Party. Yes, that was us. We got a little riled up and decided that we didn't want no British tea, so
yeah,
we just
we
decided
liked
that
our tea so much that we didn't want to tax on it.
they were probably answering the question: if tea doesn't have sugar in it, is it still tea, or is it unsweet tea?
As an American, I drink coffee only.
Yeah, I enjoy tea, but I'm not sure that I would start a rebellion over it.
And Freemasons are responsible for keeping the post office in business.
Yeah.
So many letters, so many stamps.
So many stamps. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, so many of our members do not like email. It surprises me.
That's the secret of Freemasons is we keep the paper industry, envelopes,
The paper and the stamp industry. Yeah.
and coins, mason jars.
Ironically, though, we're the people who opposed the stamp tax on tea back then, and yet now we're the people who basically mail everything via snail mail to keep the post office lights on. Our MTA, the Masonic Temple Association that 148 is a part of, up until this past year, it was required by the bylaws to send out by mail notices of the meeting. That blows my mind.
The funniest thing about it, though, is, okay, the secretary's address is right next to their secretary's address.
I know.
It literally goes to the post office and goes
And
in,
it comes
in a
right
folder
back to the temple.
right next to where it left from. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's craziness.
But it works.
It works.
Does it?
Yes.
In
We
other
love the
words,
MTA.
If your bylaws, for some reason, still say that you have to send things out through the mail via, I don't know, the Wells Fargo wagon, it might be time for you to change things.
It might be time for an update to your bylaws. Gentlemen, that's been our segment on tinfoil hats. You can now effectively remove your hats safely. Don't put an eye out. And now let's move on to our topic of today's conversation. We wanted to talk a little bit about tradition, because I think that there's especially after our season of installing new officers, a lot of traditions in various lodges that we all have traditions in our lodge.
Yeah.
And so when are they good? When are they bad? When do they stand in the way? And when does keeping a tradition maintain the culture? And when does that culture need to change?
Most of the reason that we wanted to talk about this is because we know that there is a slew of new worshipful masters out there that may have ideas in their head that they want to execute during their quote unquote their year. And sometimes those ideas might come up against lodge tradition, or it might be way off of what the lodge has traditionally done. So we thought it might be a good idea for us to sit around and discuss that to see what we come up with.
All right, so let's talk about it. Tradition, I think we all understand, is an important part of Freemasonry. Everything we do is essentially based in some sort of a tradition.
Right, it's traditional.
It's traditional.
In some way.
Yeah. The language that we use during our rituals, the movements that we do during our rituals, the reason that those things exist even are all based in tradition. And we also have different unique traditions that every lodge develops them. We have developed the tradition of having a rather lengthy prospective member period where it takes anywhere from what I think we're at like 2, maybe as long as 6 months.
We shoot for, I think 4 of the shores we've gone, and
Yeah.
6 is about the average.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on how if someone has a connection to Freemasonry first or not. But on average, though, I think we are definitely meeting the requirement before we initiate them of having known the person for 6 months because of our initiation system. We also have the tradition of wearing all black during the degree team wears all black during the degree to as a quasi uniform for the new members so that we're giving them a very high quality degree.
Which also lets everyone in the temple know, hey, 148's doing a degree.
Yeah, whenever we walk
Right.
in, like a sea of guys in black. And then when we go out afterwards, whether it's to get something to eat
Who
or,
died?
yeah, or they're asking us if we're in the service industry because we look like people,
Steakhouse
yeah,
waiters.
working at a steakhouse or something.
We look like the MIB, so we're like trying to avoid making eye contact with us because we're going to erase their memory.
Maybe
Right.
that's why they ask every time we see them.
Yeah,
Yeah, oh, you know
because
what?
they always forget
Shh, shh, shh.
because we've
Don't share secrets.
Edit.
Yeah,
edit.
yeah, tinfoil. Okay, so let's start off with this just to make sure that we're all on the same page. According to the Oxford Language Dictionary, a tradition is a noun and meaning the transmission of customs or beliefs from generation to generation, or the fact of being passed on in this way. So we're talking about passing on things from year to year in the lodge. When does it come time for the passing of particular things to come to an end? When does it come time to change? And when does it come time to just go, you know what, we have, again, let's use that phrase, we have always done it this way, ergo, let's just keep doing it that way. So what do you guys think when it comes to that one? When are they good? Let's start off with the nice things. When are traditions good?
Anything that makes it memorable is good.
Yeah, tradition being transmitting the memorable parts is, yeah, I agree with you. That's super important. I remember the tradition in my home lodge was every Tuesday, all of the people going through education were together, and then we split off into our various, what we were working on, the degree that we were working in. And it was this great moment where of camaraderie and getting to know someone in doing the work of learning the catechism. And I felt really connected me to Masonry coming in as a new person very profoundly. And that was a tradition that was, as far as I know, it's still going on today in their lodge.
I think when we also talk about tradition, as far as good traditions, we want to talk about things that make us feel connected not only to the current lodge, but to the lodge of yesteryear.
Yeah.
I know that when I became worshipful master at Tarrant Lodge, one of the things is we had a particular tradition that we did that I knew that many of the worshipful masters that had been in my seat before had done that. And that helped me to, when I was sitting in the east and I looked up on the wall and I saw all those guys going all the way back to 1906, that I was just the latest in the string of that, made me feel connected to those guys. So those types of traditions were something that I felt were good. Things that helped me feel connected in the string of the story of our lodges.
And I think that also ties in very nicely into the idea of how continuity of what we do is important. That tradition isn't just for tradition's sake, that it is, as you pointed out, it's a way of communicating values, it's a way of communicating information, and it's a way of making everyone feel like they're connected to something that's older than they are, even though we know that the Freemason we practice today is probably not the same kind of Freemasonry, the same kind of ritual that was practiced by, let's say, the first 5 worshipful masters of 148 back in the 1800s. It's probably evolved and changed, and the work that we do is a little bit different, but there's something to be said about that there's a continuity, there's that wave of change through time that we're still connected to.
And the thing is that if we look at tradition, people are like, oh, we can't ever change, it's got to stay this way, then half of us would still be going to lodge on horseback and in breeches
I like
because,
electricity.
What?
I like electricity.
Yeah.
Me too.
I need air conditioner. Thank you kindly.
And we are thankful for that air conditioner.
Laptop and keyboard is way better than pen and paper.
Absolutely. So there are some traditions that are important. I think that the tradition, the metric of whether or not a tradition is valuable or is good, to use other language, is is in answering the question in the affirmative, does it serve us well today? So if it is doing us good in some way, if it is benefiting us in some way, then I think a tradition is good. And sometimes I have to say that tradition might be counterintuitive, because one of the things that I think that we also have to remember is that it would be much more efficient and faster for our stated meetings if we eliminated the opening ritual, the closing ritual, the reading of Grand Lodge law, the educational pieces. All of our lodge business could get done much faster if we got rid of all that. But isn't that the stuff that makes Freemasonry Freemasonry?
We talk about the idea of what's the difference between an Elks Lodge and a Moose Lodge and the Lions Club and Masonry, and it's our work, it's our catechism, it's the stuff that we do that makes us different from those organizations. So,
Not just the aprons.
Yeah, not just the aprons. It's not just the beginning and the ending of our meeting, the things that we do. It's all that creates the atmosphere. Our past master, Sean DeBon, he is very much a stickler on making sure that the opening ritual is sacrosanct, that he intentionally slows it down to create a space. And we can have as much fun during the meeting and after the meeting as we want. But during that time, it's designed to be a sacrosanct ritual that sets the tone for Freemasonry and connects us to something bigger and connects us to that sea of history that we are connected to as well.
you know, what I'm thinking about, Evie, when you're saying that is the idea of when we do like our opening stuff and all that, it's almost like doing stuff so that because we're going in and out of the lodge room before meetings, as secretary sitting at the desk, putting things down on paper, talking to people, just sitting around having conversations and stuff like that. The opening of the lodge, when we do that and we set that space, what we are, in my mind, doing is we're literally transforming the space from just a room into that sacred space where we as brothers can come together as a unified body, but also as we're all on the same level and that kind of stuff. So we're setting the stage, we're setting the tone, we're transforming the room and the feel in the air when we do our opening stuff. And when we do the traditional stuff, that's what it's doing for me in that sense.
I also think that for like a snap long in my life, I practiced Buddhism. And one of the stories that I heard way back then was about a young monk who was new to the monastery, and he was learning to meditate, and his mentor told him to go meditate for 30 minutes that day. And the young man responded, "I don't have time to meditate for 30 minutes." And then his mentor said, "Then you need to meditate for an hour today." And the point isn't to punish them. That's not the point of the story. It's the idea that we need these sacred spaces. And when you think that we need to reduce the amount of those traditional sacred things that we do in our ritual, then those are probably the people who need it the most, because it carves out that time and space in your life to be a Freemason. It makes the masonry important, not the reading of the minutes important, not the other paying of the bills, because that's going to get done.
Oh, you didn't become a Mason because you wanted to hear minutes?
That
was my sole purpose, was
if they had
listen
told
to
me
minutes and complain about
if they had told me
bills.
at Grand Lodge that they were going to change the law so that we didn't have to sit through 30 minutes of minutes, I would have thrown up my hands and walked out right then.
Absolutely.
How can we be Masons without the reading of the minutes that takes 45 minutes?
Oh, Lord.
Bless their heart.
Exactly.
Minutes is plural. 2.
Minutes is plural too.
That should be done in 2 minutes.
Exactly. That's a great take on it. But there is a kind of a dark side to tradition as well. When does tradition get in the way? When does tradition need to be changed? When do we need to buck tradition?
Mm-hmm. My kind of gut reaction to the idea of when is tradition standing in the way is when we start to look at, let's use the phrase, and I know that everyone out there that's listening has heard this before, we've always done it that way. And when we start looking at that, if the way that you have always done something is not leading to growth, or it's leading to any positives. I'm not saying that it's leading only to negatives, but if it is merely maintaining the status quo, is it there serving a purpose? My answer would be no. Everything that we do at the lodge should be serving in some sort of way to grow the lodge, to make our lodges attractive to prospective members and even to our current members. Because again, if we're not doing things that not only get members in the doors, which, by the way, for those of you that have been listening for any time, know that at 148, we are not concentrating on getting people into our doors. We are perfectly fine if we're not getting 2 or 3 people every week that say that they want to hook their wagons to 148. We're fine with that. But what I'm saying is that if you're doing stuff that is not making your lodge attractive to new members, or you're doing things that's not making your lodge attractive to members that you already have, then it's probably time for that tradition to go by the wayside.
Yeah, I think that's a difficult, because just about any tradition we can look at just about any tradition and see a positive and a negative and say, we do openings. Well, is the opening ritual really doing us any good? Is it increasing value to our prospective members or to our members? And the answer to that is no, but yet I would argue that ritual is super important, and I would never advocate for bucking it.
I think the more serious you take it and the more solemn you make it feel, the more impressive it is and more impactful for younger members. So you realize these guys actually mean what they're saying.
Yeah.
They're trying. It is law too. We have to do it.
Yeah, there is that. There are certain traditions that are, in fact, codified in law that we don't have much say in. But for instance, I think a perfect example is the MTA utilizing snail mail to being required to inform members of an upcoming meeting. That is a tradition that obviously lasted decades, if not almost a century. And so at what point did that become prohibitive? Probably a long time ago, probably in 1996, when email became a very valuable part of the way we communicate today. And suddenly, if you calculate from, let's just say from the year 2000 to 2024, when that rule changed, how much money went to the U.S. Postal Service out of our coffers because
They need our
of
money.
that tradition. They do need our money, and I'm an advocate of the Postal Service. But I'm also an advocate of lodges not wasting money, organizations not wasting money.
Yeah.
And if that was a needless expense, then that is still a needless expense. And by the way, I'm not trying to harangue the MTA. It is trust me, know how organizations work, and I know the inertia of organizations. And I know that it's one of those things that it was always the way we did it. And
Right.
it wasn't that people were arguing to save the money. I'm just thinking, when does it become a problem? And it was recognized as a problem that we
Well,
don't need to be doing this.
And take the financials out of it. Let's put the problem on the lodges. Where are they mailing this to? That secretary isn't secretary anymore. They moved. So we're not even getting what they're required to send us. Whereas
Right.
the email would go straight to the current secretary or put it in their box. Save that stamp.
And it's just things like that where those traditions no longer serve us, or those traditions are actively hurting us. We all know, sitting around this table, that there are lodges in our jurisdiction that don't allow someone who actively say, if you are not a white Christian man, you can't be in our lodge. We've had members who came from those places and telling us that they have been told that, and they were very off-put by it. That is a tradition that is still alive in some corners of Freemasonry, despite the fact that looking around at your faces, I can tell that this is really...
I understand what you're saying. It's the idea of, again, if we're talking about tradition being the transmission of custom and belief and things like that, then yeah, it may be very traditional for many lodges to not want to welcome people that look a certain way into their lodge. And with that, again, I would say, is it causing your lodge to grow or to stagnate? And we know that's going to be causing lodges to stagnate. And also, let's be quite honest, the optics on it are bad. Those traditions, even if it's a tradition only at your lodge, it's going to somehow have an effect on a lodge that's just down the road from you, because what you do at your lodge is going to tie to that other lodge that's down the road, because you share the same symbols, you share the same Masonic lodge, you may not be the same one. So
This member that I'm thinking about right now, who shared this story with us, who's now a Master Mason in our lodge, shared this story of him coming to our lodge, and he delayed even pursuing Freemasonry for a number of years because he thought the Freemasonry if that's what Freemasonry represents, then I don't want to be a part of that. And then when he came to our lodge and realized that wasn't normative, that changed his mind and he became a Freemason. But you're right, it does, like some of these traditions have a ripple effect, and that we have to be careful about how we are projecting our image outside of our lodge and how those traditions might impact others. So we have traditions at 148 that I know some people with a little bit of a side eye. We've gotten a little bit of a side eye about some of the stuff that we do. We are always in the envelope of what tradition looks like. I think not beyond the scope of what is allowed by Grand Lodge law, but certainly we definitely dance around the loopholes of Grand Lodge law in some ways. And I think that's a good thing because it allows for us to do important things that are valuable to our members.
As Worshipful Master, I have no idea what you're talking about.
You're not, because you're not part of it. It's important.
And the other thing that I'm looking at with when we're talking about traditions, and where we started with the idea of new Worshipful Masters, when is it time to buck tradition? Those types of things. These are the types of conversations that I know are very difficult for new Worshipful Masters to breach in lodge, because they don't know if they're going to get the support, or they don't know how people are going to go with it.
And by people, I think that you're alluding to the old crotchety guys in the north who are the champions of that's not how I did it in my year.
And unfortunately, I won't say unfortunately, both Evve and myself are a part of that group. And you're going to be there with us, Brandy, so just wait. But I think one thing that separates us from most is that we're a little bit more open-minded when it comes to, we had the experience, now we want to see the newer guys, we want to see people like grow, we want to see new things, we want you to be successful, whereas we know that sometimes you're going to get into a lodge where the past masters get together and become this kind of weird voting block where it's we want to keep it the same way. But what I was getting to is the fact that I want to be a voice for new Worshipful Masters to feel empowered. Remember, you were elected by your brethren to lead. And so as the leader of the lodge, if you're seeing a tradition in your lodge that is not leading to growth in your lodge, that is stagnant, it's not doing anything, I want you guys to be encouraged to step out there and have that conversation. I'll be honest, when I was Worshipful Master of Tarrant Lodge, it had been, from what I had learned, it had been something that was a revolving door for us to talk about the idea of leaving our lodge building that we had and selling the lodge, because it was just too much of a building for us to take. But tradition just kept us there because nobody wanted to leave Grandpa's chair. And trust me, I understand the importance of Grandpa's chair and that great grandpa was here. We have those guys in our lodge, but again, where we were at was not only stagnant, but it was causing us to decrease in membership. So I had to step out on that limb and go, hey guys, we got to have this discussion about leaving the lodge building. We got to find some place that's safer for us to be. We've got to find some place that's not going to cost us as much to meet and to still continue to grow. And when I did that, I was really scared because, again, tradition was that we were always here. But then afterwards, I found out that the Worshipful Master 10 years before me had this conversation. the worshipful master 20 years before me had this conversation with the lodge. So I was just breaching something that had already been talked about. It had just gotten lost in the minutes somewhere.
So your tradition was kicking the ball down the curb.
Exactly.
That tradition.
Yeah. That tradition, if your
How many
lodge,
people do that, though?
if your lodge has the tradition of kicking the can down the road, I challenge you to be the one that stomps that can.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what we were talking about in episode 1 of this season, where I mentioned that so many of our lodges are micromanaging their own demise. And that's what I think some of these traditions, not the positive ones, but the ones that Cody's alluding to, I think those are just methods of micromanaging the demise, that we are just so intransigent in changing a building or what wall faces where or any number of things that we end up just doing things because, like zombies, walking with no intention forward, whether or not we know that's, and it's, I don't know, at what point do you burn the village to save it? And that's
my opinion,
that's difficult.
and I'm just going to stand on this forever. The lodge is the people, not
Absolutely.
the place.
Yes.
Absolutely. But I think that this is
All the
so
culture of the people.
one of the most heartbreaking things that I ever experienced with my mother lodge ended up having to sell their building because of various and sundry reasons that goes well beyond the scope of this conversation. But to see that history go away because of those reasons and the financial problems that every lodge, no doubt, is at some point going to have to face, it kills me to have to say that the lodge is the people, because that building represented so much in the sea of history that is Freemasonry. And if we can recognize sooner rather than later when something is being kicked down the road, the financial disaster that we keep kicking down the road, not to put too fine a point on it, but I don't know, endowments. That is a disaster that every lodge is kicking down the road, and people are trying to prop it up and make it seem like that it's a good idea for lodges. That is the worst idea, and it's killed more lodges than anything that I can pinpoint off the top of my head. That's just my opinion, but I think that the numbers bear that out. Those are the kind of things that kill me whenever we're micromanaging our own demise by allowing these things to be kicked down the road.
Our endowment return actually is more than our annual return. So we are one of the success stories where we actually make about $300 a year off of it, not counting actually running the lodge. So eventually, 100 years from now, it might be perfect.
But in our lodge specifically, what you're referring to more specifically is that the money we pay to Grand Lodge and per capita, we get back more than our payment to Grand Lodge in the return. So we're not actually making any money off of it. We're just able to have a net zero impact between us and Grand Lodge. But the operating expenses of the lodge, we still have to do that through having relatively high dues.
Just to sell it a little bit, it's nice to know that we covered that expense.
Yeah, absolutely. But so many lodges don't. For instance, every year
to cover rent, doesn't cover meals.
No, and every year I send a check to the lodge that I'm endowed in for my per capita, because I don't want them to have to pay my per capita.
Well,
because my endowment doesn't cover that. And I didn't know that when I bought the endowment.
Specifics for us, though, are our membership fee, our MTA fee, what we call our assessment. It's 3 times the Grand Lodge. So, yeah, we don't cover expenses with that return on the
and that's the problem, is that on a living Freemason, endowments are the worst idea unless your endowment
at $500
unless your endowment is, I think we calculated to break even, I think you have to have it at least at what, 2,000 now?
Well, something like that.
I think it's a $2,000 endowment to break even annually on that person's current per capita, and that's on today's numbers.
And I think that would also be somebody that is at a lodge where the lodge owns their own building. At 148, that would not be the case.
No, we have to include
MTA,
the MTA assessment as well.
Yeah.
But even still, these are traditions that end up harming us. And yet we hold on. We have people that are holding on, white knuckling this tradition of endowments that is literally killing lodges.
Yeah.
Because so many of their living members are endowed. Right now, I think we can say this pretty confidently. Because of the endowed members at 148, if we didn't have the financial security we have, we would not be able to operate because of how many people are endowed in our lodge.
Yeah, not even close.
We would not
No.
even be close
No.
because endowments are such a bad idea. We
No.
happen to be one of the exceptions where we have the financial wherewithal to circumvent that. And we also have relatively high dues. So that ends up covering much of our cost of doing business. But still,
And
tradition.
I'll say one thing too, that one thing that I really value about 148, and that I know that there's some other lodges out there that are like this, and I would really hope that a lot more lodges would get to this, is when we're talking about traditions, we're also talking about there are difficult conversations that your lodges need to have that I'm only hearing a few lodges in Texas have these tough conversations about traditions and about things that the lodge has always done, and are they still beneficial. I am getting the sense that there are way more lodges out there that don't want to have these conversations because it makes them uncomfortable, or because they feel like if they say anything against something that the lodge has always done, then they're a bad person, that they're ruining their Masonic career or something like that. I I don't like that, and I don't like that concept in our fraternity. We were a fraternity of free thinkers. Think about the people that we were talking about earlier, like the Boston Tea Party and all of those guys back in the Enlightenment period. Do you think that they were worried about tradition? No, they were making their own. And so it seems a little bit counterintuitive sometimes for us as Freemasons to just accept the way that things are without kind of free thinking and going, why not try it this way? Or to question the status quo. Why are we still doing this if we're not seeing a benefit from it?
It's not wanting to go to the doctor because you might get a diagnosis you don't want to hear. Like you think you might have cancer, so you avoid going to the doctor because you don't want to get that diagnosis. The reality is the cancer is there whether you go to the doctor or not. The sooner you acknowledge that you have that problem, the sooner you can get the necessary treatment for that
Just
problem.
to sound smart, I'm going to say
Schrodinger's cat. But the idea that you can just avoid the subject and it go away is so counterintuitive to me. But so many of us do that in lodges. We don't want to have these difficult conversations about very difficult topics because we're afraid of who we're going to offend. We're afraid of how we're going to be perceived by people and by our brothers. And I wonder how much damage is done because of that fear of
Right.
tackling the tough subjects.
No, I don't think that we're advocating for you for those of you that are brand new masters of your lodge, for you just to go in there and just kind of throw the baby out with a bathwater type thing. There has to be some sort of like careful contemplation. Maybe this is something where you do go to a trusted group of past masters and go, look, we really need to talk about this. What is your opinion on that? But ultimately, what I am saying, though, is that as the master, you are empowered and imbued with that power from your brothers to bring this up at lodge. But you also have to be willing to understand that this is going to be an uncomfortable situation. Some people may not be happy with it and that kind of stuff, but it's eventually somebody's going to be like, it may not even be this year. It may be 5, 10, 15, it may even be 50 years down the road that somebody in your lodge, if your lodge survives to that long, goes, I'm really glad that the brothers had the cojones back then to have these difficult conversations so that our lodge still survives today. I am fairly certain that in our history at 148, that there were probably some traditions or there was something going on 50, 75, maybe 100 years ago.
that's a whole other episode.
Yeah, that's a whole nother episode. That were happening, that had happened since the beginning. And some of our brethren went, hey, we need to have this conversation. Let's talk about this. And thankfully they did. And here we are, almost 175 years later, talking about this.
Yeah, tradition ends up being the energy and also the kind of the stumbling block for us in some cases. And it's difficult to discern that. It's difficult to discern when a tradition needs to go away and when a tradition needs to be stuck to. And that's what I think to your point, I think that's what our members elect worshipful masters for, is to be the discerning voice.
Y'all like to read.
Yeah, we trusted you with that. Wow, joke's on us.
Shoot.
So, well, gentlemen, it is time for us to close up this episode. As always, if you have a tradition that you like, put it in the comments of your podcast source of choice, whether it's Apple or Spotify or some other source. Pop it in the comments. We love reading the comments that come through. If you want to email us, so you can reach out to us through our website,
FortWorthLodge.com.
FortWorthLodge.com. And let us know what you think. If you have ideas for future episodes or things that you'd like us to tackle, let us know what they are. We're always looking for new and interesting ideas that our listeners want to hear. And yeah, it's been a great episode.
And I guess if you want to send us an email, or if you want to send us something snail mail, haha, good luck trying to find us.
Right? Oh, the stamps.
Just put Masonic Temple Fort Worth. We'll find it.
We'll find it. It'll get to us eventually. but-
R.E. Cody.
Yeah,
Because there's only one Cody
Attention,
in the building.
Cody.
yeah, really. Yeah, I'll open up the letters and start reading them. Yay.
But at any rate, make those comments, leave your reviews for us, listen to us on your podcast of choice, but remember to rate us. The more that you rate us with your honest reviews, subscribe, that gets our podcast out to more listeners across the state of Texas who we're trying to reach and talk to. It's always great to hear from brothers and to visit with them when they've heard the podcast. This is Evve Kirkendall signing off.
Brandy Patton, sign off.
And this is Cody Cox signing off.
Have a great day, gents.